Your rickety old bridge is a public hazard and an aesthetic blight on our modern community. I've ordered it demolished, and starting today, this corridor becomes Riverside Oaks' main approach road. That's what Todd Sutherland announced while standing in his signature pink dress shirt and black dress pants beside my family's 1870s covered bridge, clipboard pressed against his chest like a shield while the roar of his excavator drowned out the bird song over Willow Creek. The morning air carried the scent of hot diesel, cedar dust, and an ugly curl of burning insulation as his crew's saw bit into the ancient oak trusses my great-grandfather had raised by hand. His pink dress shirt gleaming in the morning sun like a beacon of suburban arrogance. The covered bridge had that sweet, warm smell old timber gets when it's baked in summer and soaked in winter for 150 years. Like vanilla and rain. But now diesel exhaust was poisoning that sacred scent, while Todd directed the systematic destruction of my family's heritage. I'm Robert Mitchell, retired County Roads Director and former civil engineer specializing in critical infrastructure. And I stood there in my red and black checkered flannel shirt and black pants, watching Todd destroy the only legal access to his entire 500-home development while calculating load capacities, right-of-way easements, and the federal penalties that would make his pink dress shirt a prison uniform within months. What Todd didn't know, while he declared my covered bridge a public hazard, was that the road it carried was the only legally deeded access to his entire Riverside Oaks development, a fact documented in every county plat, every development permit, and every emergency services response plan. His bridge demolition wasn't just property damage, it was systematic obstruction of critical infrastructure that would trigger county planning enforcement, state DOT investigation, and federal prosecutors who specialized in protecting America's transportation networks from suburban terrorists in pink dress shirts. The beautiful irony was that Todd's bridge demolition would become the catalyst for his complete annihilation when federal marshals arrested him for interfering with public safety infrastructure, while I demonstrated exactly what happens when HOA presidents forget that some private property is also the only legal access to their entire community. In 6 weeks, his pink dress shirt would be replaced with orange prison clothing, while federal judges sentenced him to decades in prison for crimes against public safety and the constitutional right to property access. What would you do if the HOA demolished your family's historic covered bridge and cut off the only road access to their entire 500-home development? Where are you watching from? Drop your state below because this story will teach you exactly how private road easements work, which agencies prosecute obstruction of access, and the specific legal strategies that turned clipboard authority into federal terrorism charges when pink dress shirt tyrants forget that some infrastructure is more than aesthetic preference. After 40 years designing county road networks and protecting critical infrastructure from interference, I'd earned my peaceful retirement on the 100-acre homestead my family had owned since 1868. The property sat on rolling Virginia hills where my great-grandfather had constructed the covered bridge in 1870, a timber-framed masterpiece that spanned Willow Creek and provided the only legal access to the valley beyond. The morning air smelled like pine needles and fresh-cut timber, while ancient wooden trusses reflected morning light that had warmed this historic structure for over 150 years. The covered bridge itself was a masterpiece of 19th-century civil engineering, constructed from local oak and pine with hand-hewn timbers and pegged joinery that had withstood decades of floods, storms, and heavy traffic. Great-grandfather had surveyed the crossing himself, choosing the narrowest point where bedrock provided solid foundation for approaches that could handle everything from horse-drawn wagons to modern school buses. The Virginia Department of Transportation had recognized its historical significance in 1972, designating it a protected historic structure. My road, winding through our homestead and across the covered bridge, was the only legally deeded access to the valley beyond our property. Every county plat, every development permit, every emergency services response plan confirmed this crucial fact. The road was critical infrastructure, not just for my family, but for anyone who needed to reach the valley beyond. Then riverside oaks sprouted on the valley floor like an expensive suburban infection. 500 McMansions with enough HOA regulations to choke a federal transportation library. The development's access was entirely dependent on my private road and covered bridge, a fact clearly documented in their permits and every deed of sale. Todd Sutherland arrived like a corporate virus wearing expensive clothing and delusions of authority. Recently retired from some development executive, Todd wore his pink dress shirt and black dress pants like a uniform of suburban conquest. During HOA meetings, he talked about aesthetic modernization and liability reduction, code language for destroying historic structures through legal terrorism. Todd's obsession with my covered bridge began during his first month as HOA president, when he declared my family's 1870s landmark a dilapidated safety hazard that compromised his development's character. The first warning came via certified mail, claiming my bridge created insurance liability that his HOA could eliminate through emergency demolition authority he didn't possess. Todd's escalation peaked when he hired structural consultants to assess my covered bridge for community risk optimization. 3 unlicensed contractors whose expertise consisted of photographing historic timber without understanding engineering principles, while Todd supervised from his BMW, his pink dress shirt pressed crisp as his arrogance. Their assessment recommended immediate bridge demolition and replacement with modern culvert that would destroy a protected historic landmark while violating county regulations protecting critical infrastructure. I watched from my property line in my red and black checkered flannel shirt, arms crossed, documenting every federal and state violation while his contractors measured and photographed a bridge protected by state historic preservation statutes since 1972. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a civil engineer and historic preservation specialist I'd worked with during my county roads career, reviewed Todd's demolition proposals with professional horror. Robert, these modifications would systematically destroy a protected historic landmark while violating state DOT regulations protecting critical infrastructure, she reported while examining plans that showed Todd's complete ignorance of civil engineering principles. He's recommending changes that would constitute willful destruction of protected historic infrastructure, creating state and federal violations that carry substantial criminal penalties. But Todd's biggest mistake was underestimating who he was attacking. A simple internet search would have revealed my 40-year career coordinating county road networks, my position as county roads director with exclusive authority over all road access, and my direct control over the transportation permits that kept his Riverside Oaks connected to the outside world. My road and covered bridge weren't just private property. They were the only legally deeded access to Todd's entire 500-home development. The road was critical infrastructure, and Todd was about to destroy the only bridge providing legal access to his community, creating a dead-end development with no legal way in or out. My professional response was methodical and devastating. I contacted Virginia Department of Transportation Critical Infrastructure Director Rebecca Torres, documenting every violation while Todd watched from his BMW. Director Mitchell, this represents systematic targeting of protected historic infrastructure and willful obstruction of critical transportation networks, she confirmed after reviewing my documentation. Special Agent David Rodriguez from the FBI's Public Safety Crimes Unit coordinated federal response with surgical precision. Director Mitchell, your covered bridge provides critical access to a 500-home development, making it critical infrastructure under federal protection, he explained during our secure briefing. Todd isn't just committing harassment, he's planning systematic obstruction of federally protected transportation networks. Dr. Evan Reed's forensic analysis of Todd's HOA finances revealed systematic embezzlement through shell companies and kickback schemes. $900,000 stolen through inflated contractor invoices and fake structural assessments, Reed reported, while spreading evidence across my kitchen table where I sat in my red and black checkered shirt. Todd used phantom safety studies to justify unnecessary spending while residents paid for destruction of their only legal road access. The first test of Todd's criminal stupidity came when county DOT inspectors arrived for routine monitoring, only to find Todd's contractors had begun preliminary demolition that included removing structural timbers with heavy machinery. The inspectors immediately called state historic preservation specialists, who arrived to find Todd directing demolition while wearing his pink dress shirt like a uniform of historic infrastructure destruction. The catastrophic test came when a major wildfire threatened Riverside Oaks at 3:47 a.m. on a dry summer morning. County Fire Services deployed engines from the primary station 12 miles away, but my covered bridge that Todd had demolished would have provided direct access for rapid response instead of the 23 minutes it took fire trucks to reach the development via circuitous secondary routes. 3 homes were completely destroyed and 7 more damaged, while firefighters struggled to establish water supply, waiting for access Todd had systematically eliminated. The fire investigation revealed Todd's bridge demolition had directly caused preventable property destruction through systematic obstruction of critical emergency access. County fire marshals documented that 4-minute response from my bridge would have provided 90% property save probability, while 23-minute response reduced save probability to 15%. Todd's aesthetic concerns had caused 3 homes to burn and endangered hundreds of lives. But the real devastation came when I implemented the complete transportation shutdown Todd had triggered. As County Roads Director, I had documented sufficient evidence of systematic obstruction of critical historic infrastructure to justify emergency access protocol modification. I made the decision sitting at my desk in my red and black checkered shirt, signing the county directive that would teach Todd exactly what happens when you eliminate the only legal road access to a 500-home development. The first domino fell when I issued a formal county roads directive reclassifying Riverside Oaks from designated access zone to unserviced development, effectively eliminating their legal road access to the county network. The reclassification meant county services, including school buses, mail delivery, and garbage collection, would be suspended due to lack of legal access. Next, I suspended mutual aid agreements that had authorized county maintenance of roads leading to Riverside Oaks, citing HOA interference with critical transportation infrastructure. The county attorney supported the suspension, noting that continued services to communities that actively obstruct public safety infrastructure created liability exposure. Within 48 hours, Todd's $500 million development was effectively isolated from the county road network. No legal road access, suspended essential services, and emergency response times increased from 4 minutes to over 30 minutes. The difference between property save and total destruction for fire victims, between school access and complete isolation for families with children. The federal trial began with media coverage that transformed Todd's pink dress shirt into a national symbol of historic infrastructure terrorism. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of historic bridge demolition, preventable property destruction, and criminal conspiracy that had endangered emergency response for aesthetic preferences while embezzling community funds. I attended every day in my red and black checkered flannel shirt, sitting in the front row where Todd could see exactly who had built the case against him. Todd's defense crumbled under cross-examination, revealing his complete ignorance of civil engineering principles, historic preservation law, and basic respect for critical transportation infrastructure. Wearing standard business clothing instead of his signature pink dress shirt, Todd appeared diminished while prosecutors played recordings of him defending his bridge demolition during active fire investigation. Virginia DOT Critical Infrastructure Director Rebecca Torres delivered testimony that ended Todd's defense permanently. Mr. Sutherland's actions represent the most egregious violation of critical transportation infrastructure protection I've encountered in 20 years, she stated, while prosecutors displayed photographs of the demolished bridge and burning homes. His demolition project eliminated the only legal road access to a 500-home development, prioritizing aesthetic concerns over proven public safety infrastructure. Dr. Sarah Martinez's civil engineering analysis demonstrated how Todd's demolition violated every principle of public safety established by decades of transportation engineering research. This represents systematic obstruction of critical historic infrastructure disguised as aesthetic modernization, she testified. Todd eliminated the only legal road access to a 500-home community, creating predictable conditions for public safety disaster. The financial evidence revealed Todd had systematically embezzled HOA funds while enriching family members through inflated contractor invoices and kickback schemes. Special Agent Rodriguez testified about discovering $1.9 million in stolen community funds and shell companies designed to launder money through Todd's brother's construction business. Riverside Oaks residents delivered devastating victim impact testimony. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson described losing her home in the wildfire because Todd's bridge demolition had blocked fire trucks from reaching her property. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. Todd Sutherland systematically obstructed critical historic infrastructure, causing preventable property destruction and endangering every resident through elimination of their only legal road access. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison delivered Todd's fate with gravity reserved for those who cause preventable disasters. The sentence was devastating. 26 years in federal prison, complete asset forfeiture totaling $6.2 million, and restitution exceeding $38 million. Todd's demolition equipment was confiscated by federal marshals, and my family's 1870s covered bridge was rebuilt with enhanced historic preservation oversight and federal funding. The restoration became a national model for historic bridge preservation that attracted support from transportation advocacy groups and federal agencies committed to protecting critical infrastructure. Todd Sutherland remains incarcerated in high-security federal prison, his appeals exhausted, early release requests consistently denied. Prison officials report he remains unrepentant, showing no understanding that his bridge demolition caused preventable property destruction. This attitude ensures he'll serve his full 26-year sentence. The broader impact extended beyond Virginia, as the federal prosecution became a landmark case setting legal precedents for prosecuting HOA officials who obstruct critical historic infrastructure. The Mitchell Historic Bridge Protection Act, new federal legislation inspired by this case, now mandates enhanced penalties for historic infrastructure destruction and strengthens DOT enforcement authority. For anyone facing similar attacks on historic infrastructure, the lessons are clear. First, document everything meticulously. Second, know your rights under federal and state historic preservation law. Third, contact county DOT enforcement immediately when HOAs threaten historic infrastructure. Finally, never let fear prevent you from defending historic infrastructure against aesthetic terrorism by pink dress shirt tyrants. Todd thought he could demolish critical infrastructure with impunity. His 26-year sentence proves that some structures exist to connect communities and preserve history rather than satisfy aesthetic preferences. 2 years later, I stood on my restored 1870s covered bridge in my red and black checkered flannel shirt, breathing air that smelled like freshly cut oak and justice, while morning sunlight illuminated hand-hewn timbers that continued connecting communities Todd had tried to isolate. His historic infrastructure destruction had been the catalyst for his complete annihilation, proving that America's transportation networks have federal defenders who will protect critical infrastructure from aesthetic terrorism. What would you do if the HOA demolished your family's historic bridge and caused preventable disasters? Share your infrastructure protection story below. Subscribe for more justice stories where pink dress shirt tyrants learn that some infrastructure exists to connect communities rather than satisfy aesthetic preferences.